Well, that is what this role is, but this is about the sin we all carry.
At 84, Nick Nolte still carries that same wild spark that made him Hollywood's ultimate outlaw, the rebel from 48 Hours and the broken fighter dad in Warrior. But in a recent interview, he didn't talk about fame, awards, or growing old. He went off script and shocked everyone. Instead, he dropped 7 names. Big names. Legends who, according to him, turned their backs on him. He said some betrayed him, mocked him, and even humiliated him right in front of crowds. The moment he started naming names, people froze, because these weren't random co-stars. These were icons he once called friends. And topping that list, Tom Cruise, the one man Nolte refused to even stand beside. Whenever people talk about who Nick Nolte can't stand, Tom Cruise's name always jumps out first. And when you hear what went down between them, you'll get why. That grudge didn't start with a fight, it started with a look. Back in 1991, both actors were backstage at a fancy Paramount event. Cruise had that perfect hair, perfect grin, surrounded by publicists treating him like Hollywood royalty. He gave Nolte a polite nod. Nolte didn't nod back. He just muttered, "That kid's been polished so hard he squeaks." People laughed at first, until they realized he wasn't joking. Years later, things exploded when Nolte was offered a role in one of Cruise's big action movies. The studio expected a normal, friendly meeting, but Nolte didn't hold back. He looked them dead in the eye and said, "I don't act next to logos." Within an hour, Cruise's team heard about it, and witnesses say Cruise looked stunned, like someone told him gravity just stopped working. At a 2006 charity dinner, things got awkward fast. Tom Cruise tried to walk past Nick Nolte toward the stage, but Nolte didn't budge. He stepped aside just enough, forcing Cruise to squeeze through like he was dodging a wall. Cruise's jaw clenched tight, and Nolte just smirked like he'd been waiting for that moment all night. But the real explosion came years later, in 2017, at a private gala in Beverly Hills. Cruise walked in surrounded by security, flashing that perfect smile as the room turned to look. Nolte was already seated, but the second he saw Cruise, he didn't say a word. He pushed back his chair, stood up, and walked straight out in front of everyone. No hesitation, no excuses. Witnesses were whispering for days. One Hollywood producer who saw it said, "That wasn't disrespect. That was a message." And the message couldn't be clearer. Nick Nolte would rather leave the room than share the same air as Tom Cruise. But Cruise wasn't the only Hollywood legend Nolte clashed with. Next on his list, Julia Roberts, his co-star in I Love Trouble back in 1994. What was supposed to be a charming romantic comedy turned into open warfare behind the scenes. For Nolte, Julia's arrival on set flipped the vibe from teamwork to tension in seconds. The breaking point came just before lunch one day in their 4th week of filming. Julia walked onto the set, glanced at Nolte, and whispered, loud enough for 2 camera operators to catch it, "I can't work like this." That one line lit the fuse. Nolte wasn't the type to swallow an insult. He fired back instantly, snapping, "Stop pretending you're doing real acting." From that second on, the set turned into a battlefield. The crew said they couldn't even be in the same room for too long. Their energy clashed like thunder and lightning. Julia hated Nolte's rough, unpredictable vibe, and Nolte couldn't stand her polished charm that could turn icy in a blink. People around them said Julia treated him like a malfunctioning prop, while Nolte acted like she was a princess who never got dirty. Julia Roberts grabbed Nick Nolte's arm way harder than the script called for. Nolte yanked himself free, stepped in close, and growled through clenched teeth, "Try that again and see what happens." It wasn't a warning, it was a threat. The entire set went dead silent until the director yelled for an immediate break. From that moment on, every scene they shared was filmed separately whenever possible. They just couldn't be in the same frame without sparks flying. Later, Julia didn't hold back either. She told people Nolte was completely disgusting to work with. And Nolte, he fired right back off camera, telling a friend, "She wants respect without earning it." When that quote leaked, it exploded across Hollywood gossip circles. There was no apology, no quiet phone call to make peace, just pure resentment that never faded. Years later, Nolte never forgave her coldness, and Roberts never forgave his brutal honesty. Their hatred didn't dissolve, it solidified. And then came another Hollywood storm, this time with Eddie Murphy, the young genius who pushed Nolte way too far. What exactly went down between Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy that turned the set of 48 Hours into a war zone by the second week of filming? That question still splits people who were there. Some say Murphy's quick rise to fame made him too cocky, while others swear it was Nolte's explosive temper that set everything off. The truth? It's somewhere in between, and it's uglier than fans ever imagined. From the first day on set, Murphy strutted in like a young king, just 21, fresh out of Saturday Night Live, adored by the world, and full of confidence that he could improvise his way through anything. Nolte showed up with years of gritty experience, expecting focus and discipline, no clowning around. Both men were insanely talented and neither wanted to back down. The first real blow-up happened during what was supposed to be a simple diner scene. Murphy went off script with a long, hilarious rant that had the whole crew cracking up. But Nolte didn't laugh, not even close. He slammed his hand on the counter so hard the coffee cup jumped, leaned in, and snapped, "You done showing off?" Murphy didn't hesitate. He shot back, "Are you done being old?" The whole set froze. You could have heard a pin drop. That was the moment their rivalry went from tension to full-blown war. From then on, every day on 48 Hours felt like a duel, two powerhouse egos circling each other, waiting for the next spark. Murphy started tweaking lines just to mess with Nolte's reactions, tossing in jokes mid-scene that threw everyone off. Nolte fired back in his own way, dragging out pauses just to break Murphy's rhythm. At one point, Nolte grumbled under his breath, "This kid thinks movies are playgrounds." Meanwhile, Murphy was joking behind Nolte's back, saying, "Somebody get Grandpa a nap." The tension finally exploded during a brutal night shoot. Murphy missed his mark, on purpose, forcing the crew to reset. Nolte lost it. He stormed over, grabbed Murphy by the collar, not rough but firm, and growled, "You're not the only star here." Murphy just laughed like he'd scored a win, while the producers rushed in to separate them for the rest of the night. Later, Nolte vented to a colleague, admitting, "Eddie's a genius, but he made me dread walking onto my own set." Murphy, he never apologized. He didn't think he had to. In his mind, the battle was over, and he'd already won. But the chaos didn't stop with Murphy. Another name on Nolte's list carried a different kind of weight: Robert De Niro, the holy method actor who drove Nolte absolutely over the edge. De Niro wasn't just someone Nolte didn't vibe with. He was the one who triggered Nolte's deepest frustration with Hollywood itself. Their feud wasn't about attitude or ego, it was about philosophy. Nolte believed real acting came from raw instinct, from living in the mess and emotion of the moment. De Niro, on the other hand, treated acting like a sacred ritual, precise, studied, and untouchable. The tension between Nick Nolte and Robert De Niro hit its peak around the time of Cape Fear. They weren't full-on enemies yet, but the warning signs were flashing bright. De Niro showed up to set fully consumed by his craft, dropping weight, reshaping his body, spending hours alone rehearsing in total silence. Nolte watched all of it, and something inside him started to boil. To Nolte, De Niro's process didn't look like dedication. It looked like performance for the sake of image. He saw it as an act to feed the legend, not the story. The breaking point came one afternoon between takes. De Niro was pacing the set, mumbling lines under his breath, even slapping his own face to wake up the character. Nolte finally couldn't take it anymore. He shook his head and said loud enough for half the crew to hear, "You're not discovering truth. You're torturing yourself for applause." The room went silent. De Niro froze mid-step. He didn't argue, didn't shout back. He just stared at Nolte with this cold, disappointed look, the kind people usually give to a child who doesn't understand something deep. That silent stare burned worse than any insult. It made Nolte's blood boil. From that day on, every time they talked about the craft of acting, it turned into a quiet battlefield. De Niro stood firm, defending his method approach, insisting on the purity of becoming the role. Nolte, on the other hand, snapped that De Niro was turning acting into a religion for pretenders. Someone who overheard their arguments swore Nolte's voice practically echoed across the soundstage. He shouted, "Real people don't live like that. You're performing the process, not the character." It wasn't just a disagreement. It was a hit straight to Nolte's artistic core. That fight left a mark that never healed. Their feud didn't stop at the studio. It followed them to award shows, parties, and industry dinners. Nolte would spot De Niro across the room and immediately turn away, refusing to even make eye contact. De Niro, always calm and collected, stayed polite but distant, the kind of quiet distance that hurts worse than open hostility. Later, Nolte admitted he respected De Niro's talent, but he couldn't stand what De Niro represented, a version of acting that felt fake to him, too polished, too controlled. After that, both men silently agreed never to work together again, keeping their encounters to a minimum. But just when Nolte thought he'd seen every kind of clash, another one blindsided him, this time with Sean Penn. And this wasn't the kind of tension built from ego or jealousy. It came from something deeper. The truth is, Nolte saw a reflection of himself in Sean Penn. The same fire, the same volatility, the same need to prove something. That realization hit him like a punch, and from that moment their chemistry turned toxic before the first argument even began. Penn was young, intense, and always teetering on the edge of confrontation. Nolte, older and more world-weary, was done dealing with people who treated every conversation like a fight. So whenever they ended up in the same room, sparks didn't just fly, they detonated. Their biggest blow-up went down at a private Hollywood fundraiser in 2004. At first, it was just a heated chat about politics. Nolte tried to stay chill until Penn leaned in, pressed a hand against Nolte's chest, and said, "You don't understand the world the way I do." The entire room froze. Nolte shoved Penn's hand off and stepped forward like he was ready to throw a punch. Before things got ugly, a producer jumped in and physically separated them. From that night on, their hostility shifted into something colder, a quiet resentment that ran deep. Penn walked around with this air of moral superiority, acting like he was Hollywood's personal conscience. Nolte saw that as pure arrogance, telling a friend, "He walks around like everyone else is uneducated." Nick Nolte and Sean Penn clashed on everything: politics, acting, fame, even what it meant to be responsible in Hollywood. Penn believed actors had a duty to use their spotlight to change the world. Nolte, he thought actors should just shut up and tell the truth through the work, not through speeches. People who'd seen them together said talking to those two felt like standing between two storms blowing in opposite directions. Every word felt like it could spark an argument. There was never a truce, not even a polite nod at events. When one walked in, the other walked out. That silent tension became a permanent part of their legacy, a reminder that some Hollywood wounds never heal. So now, with all 7 names out in the open, Tom Cruise, Julia Roberts, Eddie Murphy, Robert De Niro, Sean Penn, and the rest who crossed his line, the truth about Nick Nolte finally has light on it. These weren't just feuds. They were battle scars written into decades of Hollywood history. Each story reveals a piece of Nolte's wild, stubborn spirit, the kind of fire that made him unforgettable and impossible to tame. Behind the fame, it's clear the Hollywood we see on screen is way darker and more personal than fans ever imagined. So what do you think? Was Nick Nolte right to hold on to that anger all these years, or should he have let it go? Drop your thoughts down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.